Mark Kenny, does Bill Shorten leave the ALP Federal Conference more electable than he did beforehand?
Well, I think he has come out of the National Conference quite well. I mean, things can always go wrong for leaders at ALP National Conference. It's a fairly potentially explosive affair. There are lots of different interests, and some people don't have necessarily the next election in mind so much as policy purity or internal fights and competition for power and so forth. So it could have gone badly wrong for him, and to that extent it was seen going into the conference as something of a test for Bill Shorten. His leadership's been under some degree of threat, as we know, or not so much threat but some degree of question as to whether he really had the credentials to be...
The opinion polls show that he's not a particularly popular leader.
Yeah, well, he has been. To be fair, he's been more popular than Tony Abbott for pretty much all of this term, but it's certainly been heading quite steeply south in recent times, and that's been fuelled in part by, I think, the sort of attack on him from the government over his AWU links, and we've seen the Royal Commission. He's been forced into the sort of ignominious position of an opposition leader in the witness stand in a Royal Commission defending his former role as a union official, and it's brought up the whole question of union corruption and the faceless men of Labor and all that sort of stuff. So he's been dealing with all of that, and he's gone into this conference with that question mark hanging over him. Is he a potential Prime Minister or not? I guess he's come out and in a strengthened position. I
guess one of the views of him has been that he's been something of a party apparatchik rather than a lead from the front sort of guy, and I guess his stance, say, on turning back the boats would kind of strengthen perceptions perhaps that he's willing to lead.
Well, that's right, because he's really taken on his party on this issue. It's not an easy thing for the Labor Party to admit that it got this policy so wrong, that the policies introduced by the Rudd government effectively invited large numbers of people to make the perilous journey across open water, and we know what happened. Hundreds and hundreds of people killed, and literally thousands and thousands of people coming per month to Australia in this unregulated way. It was dangerous for border protection authorities, very dangerous for the people, lethal for many of them, and for Labor to admit that the Abbott government's ultra-tough policies have actually worked is a difficult thing, and yet Bill Shorten did that, and he drove that policy change through the conference, and he did so up front. He stated his position. I mean, admittedly, the platform itself remains silent on the question, but what he did was he explicitly sought conference's approval to keep boat turnbacks as part of the armoury that the Labor government would use, just like it is with the Liberal government, and that took some guts. So I think a lot of people are giving him some credit for having shown some leadership and some grit to do that.
So does it neutralise it as an electoral issue?
I wouldn't say it completely neutralises it. The government's already out there saying that Labor's not committed to it. It's a bit, I can sort of see echoes of Labor's attack on the coalition over climate change policy. It's one of those things where one side says, yeah, okay, you might be saying the right things, but your heart's not in it. That's the attack that the coalition is going to mount on Labor, that Labor just does not believe in tough borders, does not believe in turnbacks. And although Bill Shorten has successfully driven this policy through, his own leadership team, we know, Tanya Plibersek and Penny Wong, she's the leader in the Senate, Tanya's the deputy leader, both of those people voted against Bill Shorten's position, as did Anthony Albanese and many other people. So the government's going to be saying, oh, well, Shorten's saying the right things, but their heart's not in it, they don't mean it. That said, I think it will take a lot of the heat out of this issue.
Mark, another policy area where Bill Shorten could be seen as showing some leadership courage, if I can put it like that, is setting a more ambitious renewable energy target.
Yeah, this is the target of 50% to renewables by 2030. It's a quite ambitious target, and it's ambitious politically as well, because it does invite the attack from the government that Labor is muscling up again on climate, and that Labor is going to be doing things in the climate space, in the energy space, that are going to result in household electricity prices going up. So we've already seen ministers out there, the Treasurer, the Minister for Environment, Greg Hunt, the Treasurer, and others all saying that Labor's proposing to reintroduce a carbon tax, that there's going to be more expensive electricity and that sort of thing. And so the politics of this are quite difficult. So I think that's what's interesting about what Shorten's done here. He's gone very ambitiously into the environment space in one direction, and on asylum seekers he's stepped closer to the government. But in both cases, it's taken a bit of guts.
Interestingly, the whole issue of asylum seekers, it was always going to be an election issue, so he's tried to neutralise it. But the renewable energy target, the whole climate change things, is more a matter of choice. He's chosen to go there, hasn't he?
Well, that's right, and I think he's getting some credit for that as well. If you think about a similar sort of political dynamic, the former Howard government was very strong on industrial relations reform with its work choices. It then got absolutely hounded out of office in 2007, largely on the basis of that issue. It was a very critical issue in that election. And the Liberal Party since then has been very shy to talk about industrial relations reform, and is still so. So Shorten could have done the same thing on climate. He could have said, well, we got absolutely thrashed on the carbon tax in 2013, and we're never going back there again. Instead, he's muscled up, and I think there is a political risk in it, but it's the sort of thing which leaders are meant to do, and that's why I say out of this national conference there are people saying Bill Shorten has emerged looking more like a leader than he went in.
Just finally then, do you think the outcome of the conference, it's going to help define where politics goes in the next little while, or is the government going to try and brush it aside, go back to national security, tax reform, free trade agreements, whatever?
I think the government will try and do that, but to the extent that the policy shift on asylum seekers is critical. It's critical in that it will have some neutralising effect on that issue, and that, from the opposition's point of view, is the goal here. Really, is to get that sort of incendiary issue off the table so it can talk about other things. So the government will want to keep talking about that. The other thing is on the environment. I mean, Bill Shorten's been very clear. He wants the next election to be an election fought on climate change, because Labor's assessment, Shorten's assessment, is that the people are far ahead of the government on this question. He points to the preponderance of solar cells on people's roofs, for example, and says people actually like renewable energy. They like the whole concept of it, and they're voting with their wallets on it. So his assessment is, let's do it. Let's have an argument on that, and if we do, we think we can win it. And
I suspect Labor is betting that come the Paris conference at the end of this year, the rest of the world is going to move in advance of Australia as well.
Well, that is one of the sort of background things here as well, but I guess they'd want to be quite careful about that, because that was the calculation Kevin Rudd made back in 2009, and of course we know that he came back from that humiliated and underwhelmed, and really things started to unravel quite quickly on climate policy after that.
Okay, Mark Kenny, thanks for your insights today.
Thanks, Chris.